everyone. It's nice to come to your screen again. Um, yes, I know it's been a while. This video, the part two of the meeting assessment command verb, has been long overdue. We had the first video a couple of months ago, and so for some work, you know, issues that has really caused this delay. Now, today we're going to do the concluding part of the meeting assessment command verb. So today is the part two, and today I will be sharing my screen with you. So if you remember, in the last episode, we dealt with describe, identify, explain. So, and then the part two that I promised to do is evaluate and analyze. And then we're just going to brush quickly on critically evaluate or critically analyze, whichever one. Once you understand critically, once you understand how to evaluate and how to analyze, now to critically do it would not be an issue. So I'm going to be sharing my screen today. So I want you to have a taste of, just make it different. And then, especially for some of our virtual learners, so you can see where I'm talking from, or you may want to come back to the video and see what it is. So, like I said, this is the part two of meeting assessment command verbs. So again, I'm going to remind us quickly, just a quick recap on the command verbs that we dealt with in our last video. So we talked about identify, which I said you can use that as, in the form that you identify, you can present your answer as well, your written assignment, the same form when the question asks you to outline. And that is basically means that when you're identifying, you are recognizing main point. You are recognizing main point of, you know, of any subject that is given to you accurately and providing a little bit of description. That description is what makes it different from list. When you ask to list something, it's just a list, you name it. But this time, identify or outline will mean that you are providing, you're recognizing the main point, accurately, and providing a bit of information about it. Just a little sentence, one line sentence would do. For example, I think in the last video, I use an example of if you're asked to identify reasons why people communicate. So to identify it, one of the reasons why people communicate will be to share information with other people in the society or, in the workplace. And that is different from when an individual, if somebody is presenting their answer in a form of um, communicate. To communicate, that's just list. Little sentence that I added to share information makes that being identified. So we talked about explain as well. So again, explain simply means that you are providing detailed information about a subject with reasons to how it was or how it happened and why it was so. So when you're explaining, you're providing detailed information about a subject, showing reason why and how. So, and most often it is, advisable that you support this type of written essay with practical examples, especially, for individuals that are in the workplace. So again, Describe is just slightly different from explaining. It means that you're going to be providing detailed information in a logical way, whereby when somebody, come across that, the picture of what you have described, they can easily, identify it and say, okay, this is what was that was described. And summarize, yes, we talked about summarize as well. It is just, bringing all the main points of a particular text, or maybe policies or procedure, and give the key points around that subject matter. So that's what summarize means. So this is just a recap of what we did in the last video. And I'm going to advise you to go to our YouTube channel and then watch the last video. And there is a lot of gap in between the timing. So the last video was a couple of months back. But then here we have today. This is the concluding part of the meeting assessment command verbs. So we're going to go to the business of today. What do we have today? We have evaluate and analyze. So you can imagine, even looking at the picture that we have here, just the little picture that is showing on the screen with the evaluate and analyze. You evaluate is like a scale. You want to measure, measuring things up, like, so looking at the similarities, you're looking at the differences, and then, making a reasonable judgment, about the subject matter. And when you are asked to analyze, it is asking that, yes, you kind of scrutinize that, so the subject matter. So let's go into evaluate. What does it mean to evaluate? And this is what it means in a simple term. Evaluate means to examine strengths and weaknesses, arguments for and against, and or similarities and differences. So it means that if you're given a question to evaluate, for example, you're given a question, I'm just going to use a general form of question that we can all relate with. If you're asked to evaluate the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, that's one of the legislations that we're all familiar with, because it's applicable to all walks of life. So evaluate the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 and how it influenced your work role. So evaluation here will mean that you want to look at the strength, the good part of this policy, of this legislation, the strength of it. Without this legislation, what could have happened in our workplaces? What could have happened to staff, or how are these legislation, protected staff? Has it protected people in the community? Has it, how has it enhanced our work life? So Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. You are examining that. You will examine the positive part of it, which is the pros. You examine it, and then you now go to the weaknesses. If you can find any fault in the legislation, you go further to talk about those weaknesses. And again, you now bring in suggestions or your own, you have the right to put in your own opinion. This is where you're judging the evidence. You now judge whatever you've put down about this act, and then from different perspective, you judge it from the positive side that, this legislation has really helped to ensure that work are done or job role are being carried out in a safe way. It protects employees and employers as well. You talked about how it protects employees. You will talk about how it protects the employers as well. You give some relevant examples for your judgment, and base your judgment. You're basically drawing that from the strengths that you have mentioned or that you have examined and from the weaknesses that you have examined. Then you come to a valid conclusion. Yeah. And if you have done any research regarding this topic, make references to, maybe some section of the legislation or any research material that you may have used. And there is, you have evaluated, and such write-up will really appease your professor or your coach. They look at it, or your skills coach, they will be happy with what you've done. And I guess you will be happy with what you've done as well, because you will not need to resubmit that evidence. And there you go. So it is very important to look at all aspects of the subject you're treating. You will ask to evaluate, you know, examine the strength, talk about the strength of it, the pros, talk about the weaknesses of that subject, the cons of it, and then, make a judgment, look at the similarity, who could have been affected if this policy or the legislation wasn't in place, the importance of it, this is what we're talking about when you're asked to evaluate. Yes. So that's evaluate for you. And it's as simple as that. It's just getting the logic and understanding how to evaluate in a way that would make your answer to be sufficient and substantial, especially when you're at level 3. This evaluate and analyze is used at level 3. You would not come across any assessment question at level 2 asking you to evaluate or to analyze. Here we go. So analyze as it is to break down the subject, into separate parts, break it down into separate parts. And then you now need to examine each part and show the main idea. Now let's look at the example we used earlier on, that we say that evaluate the health and safety at work at 1974 and how it influenced your job role. Now we now want to tweak it a bit to and say analyze the importance of health and safety at work at 1974 and how it influenced your role. So you can see now, analyze the importance. First of all, you want to look at what is this Health and Safety Act 1974 about. In this, in analyzing, your personal opinion does not really come in because it is purely theoretical. It is what is on ground, and it is something that can be, tested in the sense that when it is looked up or checked up anywhere, it is what it is. Unlike evaluation, when you're evaluating, what you see as weakness of that legislation may not be what another person sees. However, there is no right, there is no wrong answer. All we're looking to see is your ability to understand the command verbs of command verb, evaluate, and produce a sufficient answer at the level you're being assessed. So moving on and then going back to the analyze, you first break subject down into different parts. And the first part I'm talking about here from the example I'm giving, that analyze the importance of health and safety at work at 1974 and how it influenced your work role. So you first of all want to look at that legislation itself. What does it stand for? What does it mean? What's the act all about? Analyze that, in detail. When you're analyzing or you're evaluating, you're not expected to give, just what is it called, simple sentences or whatever. You need to go into detail. It needs to be extensive. You need to be explicit in what you're writing. So again, analyze the act first. That is the first part. Then you come to the importance of it. What is the importance of this um, act? And again, like the evaluate, it just says that you need to examine the strength. So this is now asking you to talk about the strength of that act. Talk about the strength of it to you and the importance. Now, this is not evaluate. You're not going to be talking about the weaknesses now in this part. Question just ask you to analyze the importance of the health and safety at work at 1974 and how it influenced your role. So the parts you're going to separate that question into will be first, the act itself, yeah, to analyze the act, which is the health and safety at work at 1974. Then you will now need to analyze the importance. When you're analyzing the importance, you're not just going to be given one-line sentences that the act helps to protect workers in the workplace. Analyze it. How does it help to protect employees in the workplace? Use your work experience to elaborate on that. And when it says the importance of or the benefits of, it's not asking you just one importance. You need to analyze, minimum of three importance of that legislation. So that's the second part. And then you now move to the third part, which is going to be the how it influenced your work role. So you now want to look inward. You could be a banker, you could be a care worker, you could be a nurse, you could be a doctor, you could be a dentist, or whatever job you find yourself in. We are all, we all apply health and safety at work at 1970 in the workplace. So now bring it home to your work, practical work environment and see how that policy or legislation influence your work role. This is now what you do when you do. For example, say you have a restaurant and then whenever the floor is wet, or maybe you've just mopped the floor is a wooden floor, and then you put a sign, a caution sign to say the floor is wet. That is also health and safety at work at 1970. So you now bring it home in relation to your own work experience. See how that legislation influences your job role, and then you now analyze it. So this is what it's all about when you're being asked in any assessment task that you'd analyze or that you should evaluate. And I just hope that this is very simple for you. If you implement, the information given in this video is really going to help you and reduce the issue of resubmission with your skills coach or assessor. So now we now know what it takes to analyze and to evaluate sufficiently, in a way that meets the command words. So now critical. Sometimes you get some assessment question that will ask you to critically evaluate or critically analyze. We've talked about evaluate and analyze. So to critical would just mean that you need to develop, a detailed information around your evaluation, in a way that it's looking at its limitations. You want to criticize, it's more like you're criticizing something. So like, as I said, just like evaluate, but showing how judgments vary from different perspectives and how some judgments are stronger than others. So when you are kind of evaluating the health and safety at, at work, 1974, you now want to be looking at the flaws. Maybe you want to talk about the fire safety part of the of that act, whereby it is not allowed, and which is still part of the health and safety. There are so many legislations that were coined out of the Health and Safety Act 1974. One of it is the fire safety. So the fire extinguishers are not designed to be used to wage the door. So you may now want to, and there are fines, there are, a fine that is attached to that if an health and safety executive gets into any organization and they found that a fire extinguisher is used to wedge the door, it's open. So that could attract a fine of maybe £10,000. I'm not too sure now, but then it attracts a kind of charges that is going to be laid on them. So now, maybe now you want to talk about that, you want to criticize that, you want to look to, it is what this is all about. You want to critically, critics always find something that they don't go with in anything. And so even if sometimes there isn't much to criticize, they will still point out on some things. And this is what this critically evaluate will be talking about. It's not saying that when you're critically evaluating, that doesn't mean that, there's no good part to the subject matter. And when you're critically analyzing, it does not mean that there's no good part to the subject. However, you're trying to look at the limitations of that subject, of the subject matter. And this is where it makes a little difference too when you only ask to evaluate and to analyze. So, and I hope that this video, has, be a blessing to you. So I advise that you go and watch the part one that we did a couple of months ago. And so this is the complete part. So in the next video, we aim to talk about how to write a good reflective account. You may have found so many video on this or resources on this. But surprisingly, in my course of work, I'm going to stop sharing my video now, and I hope that's fine. So in my course of work, I still find this, every now and then, that when you ask learners, apprentices to evaluate, to write a reflective account, they still produce their work or write up in form of a personal statement. So personal statement is different from reflective account. We're going to talk briefly on that in our next episode, and with any other beneficial topic that we may have for you. So thank you so much for watching. And if you need our support, please follow the information on the screen. Thank you. Bye.